They believed they could own a legend with a simple signature. They thought the brown bomber, invincible within the ropes, would be as easy to trap outside them. A contract, some fine print, a few smooth promises, that was their plan. But they didn't account for the man who saw the fine print for what it was, a cage. They didn't understand that in Harlem, a different kind of law was enforced, not by judges, but by guardians. They were about to meet its enforcer. To understand the gravity of that afternoon in August of 1940, you must first understand the landscape. This was a Harlem caught between soaring hope and brutal reality. The Harlem Renaissance had painted the neighborhood as a beacon of black art, music, and intellect. Yet the economic desperation of the Great Depression clung stubbornly to its stoops and fire escapes. It was a world of vibrant jazz and grinding poverty, of defiant pride and systemic oppression. In this duality lived two kings, one crowned by the world, the other by the streets. Joe Louis Barrow, the heavyweight champion of the world, was more than an athlete. He was a national symbol. 2 years prior, in 1938, he had demolished Max Schmeling, Hitler's favored Aryan icon, in a single devastating round. For Black America, it wasn't just a knockout, it was a psychic earthquake. Louis carried the weight of an entire people's dignity on his broad shoulders every time he entered the ring. He was their champion in a world that consistently tried to disqualify them. Yet for all his superhuman strength and poise under the blinding lights, Joe was painfully, tragically human when the gloves came off. He had a soft heart, a trusting nature, and a gnawing, ever-present fear. The fear that the roar of the crowd would fade and he would be left with nothing. The purses were vast, $100,000, $200,000, but they flowed through his hands like water. Taxes took a monstrous cut. A large family relied on him. Managers, trainers, and a never-ending parade of friends all had their hands out. He was making a fortune and watching it evaporate, haunted by the ghosts of broke former champions who littered boxing's history. This fear, this vulnerability, was a scent in the air, and in the urban jungle of New York, predators could smell it from miles away. Meanwhile, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson operated in a different spectrum of power. Fresh out of a 3-year stint in Sing Sing, Bumpy had not returned to the shadows, he had seized the light. He had methodically consolidated control over Harlem's numbers racket, the neighborhood's illicit but ubiquitous lottery. He wasn't a mindless thug. He was a CEO of the underworld, a strategist who understood that real power was a blend of fear, respect, and a perverse sense of civic duty. He wore hand-tailored 3-piece suits, spoke in a calm, measured tone, and moved through Harlem with the quiet assurance of a man who owned the ground beneath his feet. His weapon of choice, a straight razor, was less a tool of casual violence and more a stark symbol, a reminder that his justice was personal, intimate, and permanent. To the residents, he was a complex figure, a criminal, yes, but also a rare bulwark against the predatory incursions of the downtown Italian mob, who saw Harlem as an open market for exploitation. Bumpy drew a line in the sand. This territory and its people were under his protection. It was within this volatile ecosystem that a plot was hatched. The 3 men who arranged the meeting were small-time operators with big-time ambitions. Vincent, Vinny the Silk Gallo, Frank the Bank Marino, and Anthony the Clark Dapolito were connected, but not powerful. They were middlemen who saw in Joe Louis the perfect score, a huge sum of liquid cash, owned by a man whose fame was matched only by his financial naivete. Their scheme was a classic investment con, polished for the occasion. They rented a small, dusty office on 125th Street, far from the glamorous gyms and hotels Louis was accustomed to. The setting was intentional. It felt private, serious, like a place where real, secretive business was done. On August 14th, the air thick with summer heat, Joe Louis arrived. He was alone. The men greeted him with a deference that felt good. They called him champ. They offered him a seat. On the cheap wooden desk between them lay 2 items, a glossy, professionally printed brochure for the Cotton Club Expansion Fund and a daunting 15-page contract. "Joe, can I call you Joe?" Gallo began, his voice a silky baritone. "We're at a crossroads in entertainment. The Cotton Club is moving downtown, opening new integrated venues in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and we want you to be the face of it." He slid the brochure over. It showed beautiful people laughing, crystal glasses, a stage alive with performers. Not just an endorsement, Joe, ownership, 10% of the entire enterprise. You put in $50,000 as a founding partner, and within 2 years, We project a tripling of your investment. Your name on the marquee, Joe Louis' Cotton Club. Think of the legacy. Think of the security for your mother, your family, long after the fighting days are done. The vision they painted was hypnotic. Joe saw himself not as a hired attraction, but as an owner, a businessman, a man of permanence. It was the answer to his deepest fear. Marino, the quiet muscle, leaned in. It's a guaranteed return, champ. Your money works for you, safer than any bank. Dapolito, the nervous one, tapped the contract. All the details are here, it's airtight. We just need your signature to make history. Joe picked up the contract. The pages were dense with legalese, a blur of whereases and heretofores. He trusted the world of physical contracts, the handshake before a fight, the clear terms of a bout. This was different. It felt imposing, but he associated that imposition with legitimacy. This is what real business looks like, asterisk, he thought. He flipped to the last page, where a blank line awaited him. His hand moved toward the pen. He didn't see the traps woven into the text. Page 7, Clause 4b, all invested capital shall be placed into a discretionary development fund managed solely by the general partners. Translation: Gallo, Marino, and Dapolito could take his money and do anything they wanted with it, including pocketing it. Page 11, Clause 8d, profit distribution is contingent upon the achievement of mutually agreed upon performance benchmarks to be defined post-investment by the general partners. Translation: they would set impossible goals, and he would never see a profit. Page 14, Clause 12, a early withdrawal by an investing partner shall incur a penalty equal to 200% of the initial capital contribution. Translation: if he realized he'd been had and tried to get out, he would owe them $100,000. It was financial quicksand designed to swallow him whole. His thumb hovered over the signature line. The door opened. It didn't creak or swing, it simply became an entrance. There was no knock. Ellsworth Johnson filled the doorway, then stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. He brought a new temperature into the room, a chill. He was immaculate, his suit a dark gray, his shirt starched white, his tie a perfect knot. His eyes did a slow, methodical sweep, Joe, pen in hand, the three vultures across the desk, the contract. Joe, Bumpy said, not a shout, not a growl, a statement. Put the pen down. Joe looked up, startled from his trance. Bumpy, I'm in the middle of something important here. I know exactly what you're in the middle of, Bumpy replied, his gaze now fixed on Gallo. Put it down. There was a quality in his voice that brooked no discussion. Joe set the pen on the desk. The click of it on the wood was loud in the sudden silence. Gallo recovered first, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Johnson, this is a private, confidential business meeting. We'd appreciate some privacy. Bumpy ignored him. He walked to the desk, his movements economical. He picked up the contract, his eyes scanning the pages. He didn't read every word, he read the story they told. He'd seen this story before, written with different characters, but the same villainous plot. The Cotton Club, Bumpy said, almost to himself. He looked at Joe. Joe, you ever been to the Cotton Club on Lenox Avenue? Joe shifted in his seat. Well, no, I haven't. Why not? Bumpy asked, his tone one of genuine curiosity, but his eyes were hard on Gallo. Joe was embarrassed. They don't let us in, not to sit, just to work. Bumpy nodded slowly. That's right, not as patrons, only as the help, as the entertainment. He turned the full force of his attention on Gallo. And you're selling him a piece of that? A share in a place that wouldn't even let him buy a drink at the bar? You're not selling him a club, you're selling him a photograph of a club, and you're charging him 50 grand for the frame. Gallo's composure began to crack. That's the old policy, Johnson, the new venues, the expansion, it's all integrated. This is about the future. There is no expansion, Bumpy said, his voice dropping to a low, flat register. There are no new venues. There's a brochure from a print shop and a contract from a swindler. He flipped the pages with contempt. Let's translate this for Joe. Discretionary fund means they take your money. Performance benchmarks means you'll never get it back. Withdrawal penalty means if you complain, they own you. Frank Marino, the muscle, finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. You're out of line, Johnson. We are legitimate. We have backing. Bumpy didn't even look at him. He reached to his waistband under his suit jacket. His movement was slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. He didn't pull a gun. He placed a straight razor on the desk. It lay there, sheathed in worn leather, next to the glossy, fraudulent brochure. The contrast was stark, a sermon in objects, the illusion versus the reality. The room held its breath. "Let's talk about legitimacy," Bumpy said, his voice now a whisper that somehow filled every corner of the cramped space. "Joe Louis is Harlem's legitimacy. He is our proof. He stepped into a ring with the world watching and the weight of a race on his back, and he proved we are not inferior. He is a national treasure. And you three, you are graffiti artists trying to spray paint your name on a monument." He picked up the razor. With a slow, deliberate pull, he drew the blade from its sheath. It made a soft, metallic sigh. The steel was clean, sharp, and cold. "Here is my counteroffer," Bumpy said, looking at each man in turn. "You will tear that contract into pieces so small they can't be taped back together. You will do it right now in front of me and Joe. Then you will walk out of this office, you will walk out of Harlem, and you will never, for the rest of your lives, come near this man again. You will not call him. You will not send him a letter. If you see him on the street, you will cross to the other side." He tilted the blade, catching a sliver of afternoon light from the dirty window. "Or I will provide you with a different kind of signature. I will carve a single word into each of your foreheads. The word will be thief, and I will personally escort you to the steps of every social club, every backroom, every police precinct from here to Little Italy, and I will tell them the story of the three men who tried to pick the pocket of the brown bomber. Your backing will disown you. You will be pariahs, and every morning when you shave, you will look in the mirror and see my handwriting." The threat wasn't just the physical mutilation. It was the total, professional, and social annihilation that would follow. For men like them, reputation was currency. Bumpy was threatening to burn it all. Anthony D'Appolito, the clerk, made a small, pathetic sound. A dark stain bloomed across the front of his trousers. Frank Marino's fists were clenched, but his knuckles were white with fear, not anger. Vincent Gallo's face had lost all its color. The performance was over. The audience had turned on them. We'll tear it up," Gallo stammered, his voice hoarse. "Smart," Bumpy said, not putting the razor down. With shaking hands, Gallo gathered the 15 pages. The first rip was hesitant, the second louder. Soon he was shredding the document with a frantic, desperate energy, tearing each page into halves, then quarters, then eighths. He let the pieces fall into a growing pile on the desk, a snowfall of broken promises. When it was done, a small mountain of paper confetti sat between them. Bumpy looked at Joe. "Joe, these gentlemen are leaving. You're with me." Outside, the vibrant chaos of 125th Street was a shock to the system. The honking cars, the shouts of vendors, the smell of roasted peanuts. It was life, loud and real. They walked a block in silence before Joe found his voice. "Bumpy, how in the world did you know?" Bumpy kept walking, his eyes casually scanning the crowd, which parted subtly for him. "This is my block, Joe, my street, my neighborhood. A sparrow doesn't land on a windowsill here without someone noticing. A friend of a friend who works in the building saw the champ walk in with 3 downtown suits. That news got to me before you'd finished reading the first page." Joe shook his head, a mixture of awe and shame washing over him. "I almost did it. I was gonna sign. It sounded so good. It sounded like a future." Bumpy stopped and turned to face him. He put a hand on Joe's massive shoulder. "Joe, listen to me. In that ring you're a genius. You see punches before they're thrown. You have a clock in your head. But out here," he gestured to the bustling street, "out here the punches come on paper. They come with smiles. They come from men who would never last 10 seconds with you in the ring, but who are champion-caliber liars. Your strength is a gift, but it makes you a target. You have to develop a new muscle, the muscle between your ears." He laid it out plainly, a streetwise financial advisor. "You want to invest? Fine, but you hire your own lawyer, a lawyer who works for you, who you pay directly. He reads everything. If he says a sentence smells funny, you throw the whole page out. If a deal seems like it can't lose, it's a lie. Your name is powerful. Never let someone else use it to build their house on your land." Joe absorbed this, the lesson landing harder than any punch he'd ever taken. "Why, Bumpy?" he finally asked. "You didn't have to do that. You got your own business to run." Bumpy's expression softened just a fraction. When you knocked out Schmeling, he said, I was in a bar packed with people. When the ref counted him out, the place, it didn't just cheer, it exhaled. A whole people breathed out a century of being told they were less. You did that? You think I'm some kind of noble saint? I'm not. I break laws, I do ugly things, but there's a line. You don't steal the hope of your own people. You don't con a king. Those men in their fine suits, they're worse than me, because I know what I am. They pretend to be businessmen, but they're just thieves in costume. And in Harlem, we don't let thieves dress up as friends. The three downtown men kept their word. They vanished from Harlem and never approached Joe Louis again. The story spread through the grapevine of the underworld, becoming part of the city's folklore. Joe Louis was untouchable, marked by Bumpy Johnson's protection. It was a shield more effective than any bodyguard. Joe Louis went on to defend his heavyweight title a record 25 times. His financial woes were not over, the IRS would plague him, and bad management would cost him millions. But he never again fell for a brazen, street-level con. He hired better people. He was more cautious. The image of that razor on the desk, lying beside the torn dreams of a contract, was a permanent fixture in his mind. Years later, in the early 1960s, a young sports reporter asked the agging champion, Mr. Louis, you made and lost fortunes. What was the hardest lesson you learned about money? Joe Louis leaned back, a weary smile on his face. The hardest lesson wasn't about money, it was about people. I learned that the most important fight of your life ain't for a championship belt. It's to see the world clearly before it has a chance to blindside you. I had a teacher for that, a very sharp teacher. Who was that? The reporter pressed. If you're from where I'm from, Joe said, his eyes looking past the reporter to some memory, you already know his name. Bumpy Johnson died of a heart attack in 1968. Joe Louis passed in 1981. Among Louis's personal effects was a sealed envelope dated years earlier. The note inside read, To Bumpy asterisk. You saved me from a thief that day, but you taught me how to spot all the others that came after. You showed me that the strongest armor isn't worn on the chest, but built in the mind. I never said thank you properly. So thank you, you weren't just the king of a neighborhood. You were the guardian of a symbol. I won't forget it. Joe. Bumpy never saw that letter, but the principle it honored lived on. That August afternoon was never about $50,000. It wasn't even about one boxer. It was about a code, unwritten but understood by everyone from the street sweeper to the numbers runner to the world champion. In a world quick to take from you, there are lines that must be held. There are treasures that must be guarded. And sometimes, protection doesn't come from a badge or a law book, but from a man in a sharp suit who understands that some victories must be won outside the ring, with a different kind of strength and a willingness to draw a very sharp line.